And good evening. Yes, we are doing it live right here on 790 KBC, 5 nights a week for you, weeknights in the 5 o'clock hour. Live on the air, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com and the on-demand Mottek On Money podcast for you at kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, all your favorite podcast platforms. We'll wrap up the week here with stocks pulling back, heading into the weekend with a wary eye on what's happening in the Middle East. The Dow racking up its biggest drop since August, with a closing loss of nearly 400 points today. Both the S&P 500 and NASDAQ retreating into correction territory this week and right now appear to be on track for the worst October performance in about 5 years. The S&P 500 ending down 20 today, but the NASDAQ managed a closing gain of 47 after getting beaten down earlier in the week. All the major averages did finish lower for the week, with earnings and the upheaval in the Middle East in focus. Israeli forces backed by fighter jets and drones carrying out a second ground raid into Gaza in as many days and struck targets in the outskirts of Gaza City as the military there prepares for a widely expected ground invasion in the Hamas-ruled territory following the terror attack in Israel earlier this month. I'll discuss the very latest live later this hour with Middle East expert Lisa DAFTARI, editor of the Foreign Desk. A new Speaker of the House in place this week. We'll get the latest on what's happening in Washington, what that means for federal spending, including aid to Israel and Ukraine. Taxpayer advocate Grover Norquist, president of Americans for Tax Reform, will be joining me live later this hour. But first, right to the Main Street economy tonight, and joining us live now, Rick CARUSO, business and civic leader, former L.A. mayoral candidate who had and still has the entire business community behind him. Rick CARUSO, thank you very much for taking the call here. And I see on social media you released a statement in support of Israel this week. Tell us about the statement that you posted.
Well, hello, Frank. Thanks again for having me on, and it's always good to hear your voice and be a part of this great station that serves the greater California area. You know, Frank, I think what's happened over in Israel is tragic. It's barbaric. What's happened. I did issue a statement on October 7th when it did happen that I stand with Israel, and I stand with all the innocent people who are over there, because no human being should be treated like that. And the killing of women and children and babies, that's just pure devilish hate and should never be tolerated. So I'm praying for peace. I'm praying that we have great leadership in that region and that we find a way to eventually get to peace. But, you know, clearly Israel looks like they're going to move into that part of the world, and I just hope and pray again for all the innocent people on both sides of that border. But certainly what Hamas did was just unacceptable and wrong.
And I see you've announced your support for various organizations responding to this devastating crisis there in the Middle East. Tell us more about that.
Well, as you know, when you have these tragedies, these organizations and people, we have so many beautiful angels around the world that have leaned in and helping. And so my team researched 4 different organizations that are working actually on both sides of the border there, again, focusing on the innocent people that have been impacted and hurt, that need care, that need hospitals, that need medicine, that need food, all of these kind of things, just the basic needs of a human being. And so we've leaned in pretty heavy with donations to do that. And we're going to continue to do that. And I encourage everybody in Los Angeles, you don't have to give a lot. You can give whatever you can afford to give, maybe make it a little bit painful, but get friends and neighbors to do the same, because they need a lot of equipment, food, drugs, help, and support, especially as we're coming into these next few weeks.
On the air live with Rick CARUSO, and here we are at the end of October already. It's hard to believe November is just around the corner, the holiday season approaching, and certainly we have a watchful eye on what's happening there with the events unfolding in the Middle East, as well as, of course, the war between Russia and Ukraine. A very nervous time on the geopolitical front, and it appears to be a nervous time now also in the financial markets and the economy once again. Give us your view of things on that front.
You know, Frank, I am worried about where this world is right now. The geopolitics of the world, as you said, we've got a war going on in Eastern Europe with Ukraine, Russia, what's going on in the Middle East, with China, the moves that they're making and moving their ships around, the risk to Taiwan. we're in a very, very complicated time and a dangerous time. And I think that's also starting to affect our economy, business. Nobody likes uncertainty. And when there's uncertainty, companies, individuals, you start pulling back on going out or spending more money, travel. I think we're going to start really feeling this in our economy. And the interest rates staying high, I believe, is a real problem. And we're starting to see the effects, the highest default rate on car loans, the highest default rate in years on credit cards, credit card debt up at 20%. That is just unsustainable. So I think we all have to be cautious. We should all be out enjoying our life and celebrating the great life we have living in the best country in the world. But I think we do need to be cautious.
On the air live with Rick Caruso, developer of the most popular shopping destinations here in Southern California, including the Grove, Americana at Brand Commons at Calabasas, and Pacific Palisades Village. And as we approach the holiday season, how are we setting up for it from a business standpoint? I'm sure all of your places are going to be magnificent. And remember in the past, during the pandemic, there was a discussion about whether even Santa Claus would be there, and certainly he was. Give us an update on what you see ahead.
Well, you know us, Frank. We like celebrating. We like celebrating everything, and we like celebrating the holidays. And we're going to be doing that, all the holidays. And we're certainly getting ready for Christmas. And the trees will be coming in on all the properties. And the Santa houses are already under construction. I was at the Americana yesterday. That's under construction. The Santa house at the Grove. And we need happy times and things to get out and have some joy and celebrate and be with friends and family. So I hope people come to the properties, if for nothing else, just to take in the beautiful sights and sounds and enjoy the holidays. And we're going to have a wonderful holiday show at the properties, just like we always do. And Santa will be there. Santa's going to be visiting the Grove and the Americana and out at the Promenade at Westlake and all of our properties. So it's going to be fun. And we're in the business of enriching lives. And that's a really important business right now, and we're very honored that we can do that.
Well, thank you for making it wonderful for all of us. I just sent some visitors from Europe to the Grove the other day, and of course they absolutely loved it and love you as a result of that, Rick Caruso. And while we have you on the line here, taking a look at what's happening around Los Angeles. Remember a couple of weeks ago, this idea was floated about demolishing the Marina 90 freeway, the Marina Freeway, and turning it into an area for the homeless and so forth. We see now that the Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass has reversed her support of this plan to at least study it. What's your reaction to this? And would you support demolishing the 405, for example, to allow for more housing? Just kidding, Frank, about that.
We need more. Yeah, I know. We need more housing in this city. We're not building any. I don't know what the heck we're doing. And you can't solve the homeless problem unless you build housing. You can't solve the problem of people affording homes. The average worker, firefighters, police, teachers need to be able to afford a home in Los Angeles. You have to build in order to do that. And I said when we were together on your show a couple of weeks ago, that was the dumbest idea I have ever heard, that we're going to go knock down a freeway to build housing. We've got more than enough land to do that and to do it right. We need to invest in our economy in L.A. We need to bring down our crime. We need to clean up the homeless. We need to get them off the streets and the sidewalks, out of the RVs, parked along the streets. It's wrong. It's inhumane. And it's not fair to the communities that are being impacted. So I think we just need to buckle down, focus on the right way to get things done, and get them done. It's not that complicated, but we just need to have the political courage and the will of our elected officials to go do the right thing and get our city back on track.
It was a year ago that we were on the air when that racist recording was made involving the L.A. City Council President Nuri Martinez, as well as the labor leader in place at that time. Both have since resigned, and Kevin De Leon still on the city council. In fact, recently announced his run for re-election. You were running for mayor at that time and spoke out on that issue at that time. Here we are 1 year later.
Yeah, and it was, the comments that were made were wrong. And I worry that we're living in a society where somehow, hatred seems to get accepted. And we're certainly seeing that now on protests around the country, what's happening on college campuses. We have to take a very firm position that hatred against any group is not tolerated. And we have to have very clear messaging around that. But, that tape was wrong. And the releasing of it, hopefully they'll find who did it, and they'll bring him to justice, which should be done.
Right, and certainly we were discussing at that time here we are in the second largest city in the United States with one of the biggest economies in the world. The city paralyzed by what happened then, and still paralyzed.
Yeah, it is. But what I see, Frank, and I think there's real optimism that should be out there, because we're still seeing on our properties continued growth. The consumer is spending. We haven't seen any pullback on that. We may start seeing some of it, as these interest rates continue to stay high. But at this point, we haven't. And that's whether it's at the Grove, the Palisades, Americana, out in Thousand Oaks. But I think the difference is we've got a very clean, very safe, very happy environment. And if you go around the city and you clean it up and you make it safe and you make it enjoyable to be at, businesses will come back and boom. And again, this is not rocket science. It's not complicated. It's just a matter of following good basic principles and, again, taking action and making it happen. And we can do that. We have so many of our streets in Los Angeles that have been negatively impacted, and small businesses are suffering. It's not fair to them. And we shouldn't be transferring the problems that the city should be taking care of, like policing and cleaning the streets and dealing with encampments, and pushing that off to private enterprise, especially small business, that can't afford it. So we're going to start choking down our small business. That's the backbone of our economy.
Another important point, another big story that came out this week, an L.A. County judge dismissing the lawsuit challenging L.A.'s so-called mansion tax, marking the end of the months-long legal challenge from the real estate business. And what's your reaction to that big news here?
I was disappointed. I don't believe in the mansion tax, and it's not a mansion tax. It's that was a very tricky, actually, in my opinion, perverted way of getting this passed, because it's a tax on all real estate if it sells for over $5 million, whether it's office, industrial, apartments, or somebody's home. It has put a cold blanket on the economy in L.A. because people do not want to invest or buy in Los Angeles, knowing there's an additional tax. No other city in the area has it in Los Angeles, because you'll build that into what you're willing to pay for something. And you can go to neighboring cities, Glendale, Culver City, whatever the case is, they don't have that additional tax. So it puts Los Angeles at a disadvantage from a business standpoint, and we're feeling the effects of that. So hopefully there's going to be some kind of legislation or maybe another lawsuit that will be successful to overturn it. We need to be competitive with the cities next to us.
And last but not least, most importantly, among all of your illustrious titles, I know you're most proud of the Proud Dad title, and I see the up-and-coming entrepreneur in your household. Your daughter has just been honored. Tell us about that.
She was honored for her advocacy of children that have hearing loss or any form of disability. So many children that are born with a disability literally are not heard because nobody advocates for them. Schools many times, most of the time, quite frankly, don't understand the needs. I know in Gianna's case, whether it was her grammar school or high school or college, did not know how to accommodate her on her hearing loss. And she's turned into a great advocate for that. And we believe as a family that we all bear some cross, and we can take that and use it for good and help others. And I'm incredibly proud of Gianna and what she's done. And we were there as a family cheering her on as she was acknowledged for her good work. And I know she's going to continue to pay it forward.
Well, we join in the chorus of congratulations, and we wish you and your family all the best. And thank you very much for taking the call here this evening. That is Rick Caruso, business leader, civic leader, philanthropist, and indeed angel in the City of Angels. Thank you very much for joining us live here this evening.
Thank you, Frank. God bless you.
Thank you very much. Rick Caruso, right out to the freeways now. You're on 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. Rough landing for the stock market today. The Dow down 367 points, settling at 32,418. The S&P 500 down 20 at 4,117. And the Nasdaq managed a closing gain today of 47 points after getting pummeled earlier in the week, and it settled at 12,643. We did see both the Nasdaq and the S&P 500 dip into correction territory this week. That is down at least 10% from its most recent high, and both are poised for their worst October performance since 2018. Stocks racking up a losing week, with the S&P 500 falling during 4 out of the 5 trading days to see its biggest weekly drop in more than a month. Looks like the 3 major averages finished lower on the week, the 6th such decline in 8 weeks, as a sell-off that began in early August continued to build steam, given what's happening in the Middle East. The earnings news also in focus. The market did get a brief reprieve earlier after Amazon reported earnings that blew past analysts' expectations, which showcased the company's progress in lifting margins. Amazon shares up about 7%. Strong numbers from Amazon helped lift the Nasdaq today, which outperformed the Dow by 1.5%, according to MarketWatch. That's the largest such margin since late August. Amazon earnings, though, ultimately were not enough to ease investors' concerns about soft sales volumes and expected difficulties with profit margin expansion at America's largest companies. Markets remain nervous, of course, focus on the Israel-Hamas conflict, which we'll be talking about later this hour. Earlier reports about a potential ceasefire were not confirmed, and said Israel is expanding its ground operations in Gaza. Elevated geopolitical risk have made investors less willing to hold stocks heading into the weekend, according to some analysts today. The latest reports on the economy included the so-called PCE index, which we're told is the Fed's preferred inflation gauge, showed the cost of goods and services rising a higher than expected 0.4% in September, yep, higher than expected. And a measure of core inflation, meanwhile, was in line with expectations. The report showed consumer spending rose 0.7% in September, a sign of spending strength previously reflected in the retail sales numbers we got recently. Economists analyzing the report concluded that while the increase in spending looked favorable, it came at the expense of declining savings, adding to concerns about the strength of the consumer heading into the holiday season. Meanwhile, the latest reading on consumer confidence from the University of Michigan coming out today showed consumer confidence improved slightly at the end of this month, while higher gas prices left people more worried about inflation. As we've seen gas prices go up historically, consumer confidence goes down. We have seen gas prices come down a bit lately, and here we are with a slight increase in consumer confidence. Here in Southern California, prices still stubbornly high, but off the recent highs. Right now, regular gas in Los Angeles averages $5.44 a gallon. In the LA Long Beach area, down a couple of cents since yesterday. Premium still up there at $5.81 a gallon, and diesel now still high above $6 a gallon, $6.19 the average price for diesel in the LA Long Beach area. Taking a look at the price of oil. Nervous time, of course, in the oil markets, given what's happened in the Middle East. We saw that big jump following the attack on Israel by Hamas. Right now, oil is hovering about $2 higher at $85.26 a barrel. Gold, meanwhile, above $2,000 today, up about $19 at $2,016.30 an ounce. The volatility index moved higher by about 3%, the so-called Wall Street Fear Index moving higher. Bitcoin had a big week. We see in the crypto space, Bitcoin up about $8 now at $33,850. It had blown past $34K earlier in the week. Ethereum down $1 now, $1,780, and Doge at 7 cents. And now the latest news for you right here on 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues here on 790 KBC. Well, a big week. We have a new Speaker of the House in place now in Washington. Let's get the latest now on what that means for federal spending and you, the taxpayer. Also aid to Israel and Ukraine, given the unfolding crises. Taxpayer advocate Grover Norquist live on the line with us now, president of Americans for Tax Reform. Grover, thank you very much for taking the call, and give us an update from your ringside seat there in Washington about how the new Speaker will have an impact on tax policy, obviously, and as now a Speaker of the House, and what's happening there.
Sure, absolutely. The new Speaker is good news for a number of reasons. One is not having a Speaker. It's a mistake and expensive. and convince people the Republicans were incapable of governing, when actually 100% of the Republicans voted for the new Speaker, Mike Johnson, and only 96% voted for the previous guy. So you're really talking about a 4% shift there. But it certainly looked in the national press as if the Republican Party is falling apart because 8 people were not working with the rest of the Republicans. That said, we have a new Speaker. He is a solid Reagan Republican. He has signed the Taxpayer Protection Pledge every year that he's run for office. He has kept it. He is committed to Reagan Republicanism, to keeping spending down, taxes down, regulatory burden down. The speech he gave to the caucus when they chose him, that could have been given by Ronald Reagan. It was a very good, traditional, limited government, let's pay attention to the Constitution talk. And he's surrounded by Scalise, who's also from Louisiana. He's the number 2 guy. He's a longtime serious Reagan Republican. And Emmer and the others. So he has a good team around him, and I think they'll work together very well. Now, mind you, they're up against the Democratic Senate, Democratic president. They've really got to go make the case for winning the House, the Senate, and the presidency in 2024, and that's what we do for the next year.
On your live with Grover Norquist, thanks for that education on the new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. And what about the crisis in Israel now? The president asking for aid to Israel as well as Ukraine. Where does that stand at this point?
I think they'll have if you look at there's a majority vote in the House and the Senate for aid to Ukraine and aid for Israel. If you put them together, they'll probably pass. The president's asking for both. So I think it's something very close to what the president's putting forward will pass, partially because of the strong support for helping Israel after the terrorist attack, but also the recognition that the Soviet Union, Russia, which wants to put the Soviet Union back together again, would threaten all of Europe if they actually were able to take Ukraine. It's a huge. Russia without Ukraine is nothing. Russia with Ukraine borders all of Eastern Europe.
On the tax front, we were reminded that the tax cuts put into place by President Trump will be expiring at some point. With the new speaker in place now, will there be a move to retain those tax advantages that President Trump had put into place?
Oh, absolutely. You're quite right. That is one of the biggest changes that took place. Because we didn't have a speaker, we weren't moving forward. We weren't forcing votes on issues like, and most importantly, the tax cut. The Trump tax cuts, which did so much to strengthen the economy. That's the reason why the economy is still standing, is we took the corporate rate from 35, worst in the world, down to 21, reasonably competitive. Because we did that, we've had some growth, but the expensing, quick depreciation, begins to phase out in the year. And if we don't extend that, one of the biggest incentives to more investment disappears. And that would be extremely unhelpful for the economy. So the Republicans will put this together, and I think we'll get that certainly passed through the House. And, you know, there's so much good stuff in there. I think we could have something happen similar to what happened with Obama. Remember Obama agreed to make permanent 85% of the Bush tax cuts? That's a pretty big concession on his part. I think we'll see something like that with Biden, because they lied to everybody and said, you know what, there are no tax cuts for middle-income people here. And, of course, the things that expire are the tax cuts for middle-income people. So they'd rather extend it than admit they were lying.
Right. You reminded me we had those Bush-era tax cuts, or I heard one of the local television anchors here refer to them once as the Bush-era tax cuts. Kind of got the words a little bit too close together, but I do remember that as well. Now, get a load of this. Here's a late Friday news report. This one in Politico. This is very interesting. I don't know if you had a chance to see this, but might be breaking some news to you here. From Politico, it says the top federal prosecutor in Los Angeles confirmed to congressional investigators that he declined to bring tax charges against Hunter Biden, the president's son, last year, but insisted his decision did not hamper the investigation into the president's son. Martin Estrada, the U.S. attorney here in California who made those remarks in closed-door testimony, according to Politico, told the investigators that the Delaware prosecutors running the Hunter Biden probe have long been able to file charges in California. In fact, Estrada said at least 2 Delaware prosecutors were given special authority to operate in California long before their boss, David Weiss, was appointed as special counsel earlier this year. I don't know if you had a chance to review this, but what's your reaction to that report this afternoon?
It looks like a continuing problem that the Department of Justice under Biden is thoroughly politicized. They're making decisions on who to go after and who not to go after based on politics, not justice. We had the terrible case where the man who stole thousands and thousands of people's IRS private data and handed it to a left-wing group. Every single one of those, 3,000, 4,000, maybe more, every single one of those is a 5-year felony. And they're only charging him with 1 felony, not 4,000. And which means they can, he won't spend much time in prison at all. This is a felony. We passed a law to make it a felony to look at anybody's tax return if he didn't have a good reason, or to share it with anybody for any reason. And the Biden administration says, we don't care. Well, what do you think happens to your privacy now that everybody in the IRS has been told that you'll get 1/4,000th of the penalty if that happened? I mean, it's a huge, huge challenge, and it just smells like what happened with Biden, and what happened with Biden smells like this IRS thing.
On the air live with Grover Norquist, America's leading taxpayer advocate, president of Americans for Tax Reform. On another matter, obviously with the Middle East crisis, a lot of nervousness about energy prices once again. And it looks like we've just about depleted our strategic petroleum reserve at this point, following the spike in oil prices after Russia invaded Ukraine. Any change in energy policy seen under this new speaker? And what about the energy issues here, which, of course, fueled inflation tremendously over the past couple of years now?
Well, there are some things states can do. During Obama's presidency, we were able to open up state land and private land for fracking. And Biden dropped the amount of energy that could be raised on federal land because he ran it, but he couldn't do it for private land. He couldn't do it for state land. So states can help make it easier to get more energy. That's very, very important to get done. I don't think, Biden has done some flip-flops. I was going to say I don't think he'll do that because he's so extreme on his environmental stuff. But he has done some turnarounds of drilling in Alaska, stuff like that. So they just might be scared enough. They're talking about doing something at the border, which I wonder where they were for the last 3 years. But there's something to be said for run crazy left for 3 years and then pretend to be conservative for a year and hope people have short numbers.
Robert, thank you very much for that important update tonight, live from Washington. I look forward to speaking with you again very soon with everything that's going on there and indeed around the world at this point. That is the leading taxpayer advocate in the United States, Grover Norquist, the president of Americans for Tax Reform. Grover, thank you very much for coming to the line here this evening.
Thank you.
Right after the freeways we go now, here on 790 KABC. Friends, if you're hurt in an accident, you need an experienced advocate. And Clark Fielding and his team of sharks at Fielding Law are on standby ready to dive into your case. My friend Clark the Shark is fearless for justice and your go-to attorney when injured in an accident that wasn't your fault. Whether it's a car accident, slip, trip, fall, or any kind of personal injury, Fielding Law is here to make sure you get the care, attention, and compensation you deserve. Fielding Law can assess the circumstances of the case, negotiate tenaciously with the insurance companies, and if necessary, file a lawsuit and litigate to seek fair compensation on behalf of you, the injured party. An injury is a major disruption in your life. Medical expenses, lost wages, pain and suffering, Property damage and other losses incurred as a result of the injury are all part of the damages. Don't try and handle the process alone. You need an expert in the process, and the team at Fielding Law are the ones to trust. Put Clark Fielding's number in your phone right now under the word accident. That number is 833-88-SHARK. 833-88-SHARK, or go to clarkthesharklaw.com. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. Following the latest developments in the Middle East this evening, Israeli forces backed by fighter jets and drones carried out a second ground raid into Gaza in as many days and struck targets in the outskirts of Gaza City, according to the military, as it prepares for a widely expected ground invasion of the Hamas-ruled territory. According to the Associated Press, U.S. warplanes, meanwhile, this week struck targets in eastern Syria that the Pentagon said were linked to Iran's Revolutionary Guard after a string of attacks on U.S. forces by Iran-backed fighters, adding to the already high regional tensions fueled by the 3-week Gaza war. The Palestinian death toll has soared past 7,000 as Israel has carried out waves of devastating airstrikes in response to the bloody Hamas terror attack into southern Israel on October 7th on the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War. Joining us live now is Middle East expert Lisa DAFTARI, the editor of the Foreign Desk, following all of these developments. Lisa DAFTARI, what's the latest that you have there?
It looks as though after two ground incursions that we've had, these are guided, meaning these are based on Israeli intelligence going into very targeted and specific tasks and coming out. It looks like the ground invasion that has been long awaited after 3 weeks after the Hamas massacre is now imminent.
In the Jerusalem Post here, Israeli tanks take a position inside the Gaza Strip preparing for an incursion. This is the headline in the Jerusalem Post right now. IDF ground troops expanding their efforts inside Gaza to dismantle the Hamas terror infrastructure, according to the IDF spokesman. So it looks like this weekend could be the weekend where we see some major action here.
Potentially. I mean, we have expected it to come much sooner. I think many are surprised as to why the IDF has waited this long. We do believe this is a calculated strategy. They're looking for very targeted areas. And based on the news that we have seen out of the last 3 weeks as to where these missiles are being hidden, where there are pockets of civilians that are being held as human shields, the IDF is working around a maze. That's an understatement as to what they're dealing with in terms of figuring it out and trying to have as targeted attacks as possible while minimizing the civilian casualties. I will remind you the 7,000 number of Palestinian deaths that is reported by Gaza's Ministry of Affairs, that is equivalent to Hamas, the government there, of course, reporting those numbers. So according to President Biden, this is not something that he will take with a grain of salt. He does not believe that this is full accuracy, but these are the numbers that we have. There's no way to independently confirm either of the casualties on either side.
On the line with Lisa DAFTARI, and very significantly, the U.S. attacked targets in eastern Syria that the Pentagon said were linked to Iran's Revolutionary Guard. Tell us about the significance of that action this week.
Right. So Israel itself is fighting militants and terrorists on 3 different fronts. In the north, Hezbollah, which is a proxy of Iran inside of Lebanon. The West Bank, of course, run by the Palestinian Authority, and of course, militants and Palestinian Islamic Jihad there as well. And, of course, Gaza, where Hamas is. Outside in the region, very close by, we have other proxies of Iran's regime. Yemen, where the Houthis are located. Inside Iraq, where we have different insurgencies of Iran's regime. Inside Syria, where you have different insurgencies as well by Iran's regime as well. And, of course, all of these having their weapons pointed towards Israel and targeting now specifically U.S. assets there. The United States decided to retaliate last night, choosing 2 different areas to have just targeted attacks. They did not continue. We have had U.S. casualties. We have had injuries to U.S. troops and assets there. This is a multi-pronged war of Iran's regime against the U.S. and Israel, what they have said for 44 years, calling it the big Satan and the little Satan, the big Satan being the United States and the little Satan being Israel.
The Associated Press is reporting more than 1,400 people in Israel, mostly civilians, were killed during the initial Hamas attack. According to the Israeli government, Hamas also holding at least 224 captives inside Gaza, including men, women, children, and older adults. The fate of these hostages unknown. What information do you have regarding the hostages at this point?
Yeah, we're assuming that's why the ground invasion has been delayed thus far. We know that the Qataris are working together to broker a deal between Hamas and Israel to see that these hostages are released. There are now 229 hostages that are being reported that are being held. They believe there are at least 10 Americans, if not more, and other nationals in that grouping as well. 4 of the hostages have been released, 2 American citizens and 2 elderly Israeli women whose spouses are still being held. This is an ongoing, very, very fluid situation. Obviously, Israel very concerned for the well-being of those hostages. I heard Bibi Netanyahu's secretary today talking about how if there is one of those hostages that is hurt, that is a warning to Hamas not to hurt or injure or harm any of those hostages, and to hopefully be able to negotiate a deal where those hostages can come back unharmed and very soon.
And in the meantime, we see more American military assets moving into the region. The U.S. Has now sent 2 aircraft carrier strike groups to the region, along with additional fighter jets and other weaponry and personnel, in part to deter Iran and its allies from entering the war on the side of Hamas. Hezbollah, an Iranian-backed ally of Hamas in Lebanon, has reportedly traded fire with Israel along the border. What about Iran's role in all of this, and the administration's response to Iran's reported direct involvement in all this?
Yeah, Iran's regime obviously pulling the puppet strings and orchestrating the attack by Hamas. That is ongoing, by the way. It wasn't just October 7th, but the missiles continue to fall into Israel by land, by sea. This is something that's not actually reported by the mainstream media, but it is actually ongoing. Iran's regime is also orchestrating its proxies to attack the United States' different assets and also point their weapons towards Israel as well. There was a Houthi missile, for example, that fell into Egypt today. We have other examples of them trying to point their missiles towards Israel, and the Iran regime is sitting back. The Biden administration, while coming down very hard on Hamas, has distanced itself from the narrative that Iran's regime is involved in all of this. Meanwhile, as you said, the United States sending different reinforcements to the region to send a powerful message to Iran's regime while not mentioning them, not getting carried into it, not wanting to get involved into it.
Lisa Daftari, thank you very much for that comprehensive update. We'll continue to follow all this with you. That is Lisa Daftari, editor of The Foreign Desk, Middle East expert, live with us here tonight on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC.
You loved Lala Kent on Vanderpump Rules. Now get to know her on Give Them Lala.
I used to be so down with dudes giving me pet names right off the bat. The second a dude, I first meet him and he calls me baby, I'm like, and we're done here. Goodbye.
Really?
Yeah, don't call me babe, baby, boo, bye.
Interesting. That's
but
a big
I
red
can
flag.
call them boo because I call everybody boo.
What if that's their excuse?
Yeah.
That's funny.
No, you don't. You're a man. You move different than me.
Watch what Lala is talking about on YouTube or search for Give Them Lala wherever you listen.